For millions of years, the story of humanity was a story of one thing getting bigger: your brain. Go back far enough, and our ancestors had brains about the size of a chimpanzee's. Then, slowly, over millions of years, they grew and grew. And that growth is basically the whole story of us. Bigger brains gave us tools, then language, then art, farming, cities, writing, science, everything you think of as human. The expanding brain was the engine of all of it. So you'd assume that trend just kept going. That the human brain today, sitting inside your skull right now, is the biggest and most advanced our species has ever had. The peak of millions of years of growth. It isn't. Because around 10,000 years ago, something happened that almost nobody talks about. The trend reversed, and it's been going the other way ever since. Here's the fact that should stop you in your tracks. Your brain is smaller than the brain of a human who lived during the last ice age, not a different species, not some distant ape-like ancestor. A modern human, anatomically identical to you, who hunted mammoths and painted animals on cave walls. If you put their skull next to yours, theirs would hold more brain than yours does. And this isn't a fringe claim from one weird study. It's an observation anthropologists have been making for nearly a century, backed by thousands of skulls, from Europe to Africa to Asia. Wherever they looked, the same pattern showed up. The human brain got smaller. So the real question is a deeply strange one. Why would evolution, after spending millions of years building a bigger brain, suddenly start taking it back? First, let's be clear about how much we're talking about, because it's more than you'd think. Measurements of skulls from the last 10 to 20,000 years show the human brain has shrunk by roughly 10%. To put that in physical terms, the lost volume is about the size of a tennis ball. A tennis ball of brain, gone, in an evolutionary eye blink. And here's a detail that makes it even stranger. The biggest, most impressive human brains in the fossil record don't belong to us. They belong to the cro-magnons, Ice Age humans from around 20 to 30,000 years ago. Those people, the ones leaving handprints and painting bison on cave walls by firelight, had brains noticeably larger than the average person walking around today. Which raises an obvious, uncomfortable question. Does a smaller brain mean we got dumber? Hold that thought, because the answer is not what you'd expect. First, we have to figure out why it shrank at all, and scientists have three big ideas. The first explanation is the least dramatic, but probably the most important. Your brain didn't necessarily shrink on its own. Your whole body did. Here's the principle. Brain size is tied to body size. A bigger body needs a bigger nervous system to run it, more muscle to control, more surface to feel, more signals to manage. So across the animal kingdom, bigger bodies tend to come with bigger brains, just to handle the extra hardware. And over the last 10,000 years, human bodies got smaller. The Ice Age humans were, on average, taller and much more physically robust than we are. Thicker bones, more muscle, built for a brutally demanding life. As farming replaced hunting and life got a little less physically extreme, our bodies became smaller and lighter. And as the body shrank, the brain that served it shrank right along with it. By this logic, a chunk of that missing tennis ball isn't lost intelligence at all. It's just a smaller engine for a smaller machine. The second theory is stranger, and honestly, kind of beautiful. The idea is that we domesticated ourselves. Think about what happens when humans domesticate a wild animal. Take wolves into dogs. Over generations of breeding for tameness, dogs didn't just get friendlier, they physically changed. Floppier ears, more childlike faces into adulthood, and consistently smaller brains than their wild wolf ancestors. This shows up again and again across domesticated species. Tameness and smaller brains travel together. Now here's the leap. Some researchers argue that Over the last several thousand years, humans effectively domesticated themselves. As we shifted from small, often violent groups into large cooperative societies, the people who thrived were the ones who were less aggressive, more social, better at getting along. Natural selection started favoring friendliness over hostility. This idea even has a name: survival of the friendliest. And if domestication reliably comes with a smaller brain in every other animal, then maybe, as we bred ourselves for cooperation, we quietly followed the same rule. We got kinder. And in the process, we may have gotten smaller brained, the same way our dogs did. The third theory is the one that feels a little too relevant today. The idea is that we outsourced our own minds. Notice when the shrinking may have sped up, right around the time complex societies were exploding. Writing was spreading, cities were growing, and crucially, human knowledge was becoming too vast for any single person to hold in their own head. For most of history, everything you knew had to be stored inside your own skull. Every skill, every story, every piece of survival knowledge. That demands a lot of brain. But once we had writing, trade, and specialized roles, you no longer had to personally know everything. The blacksmith knew metal. The farmer knew crops. The knowledge lived in the group, and later in books. You could offload it. The theory goes that once the pressure to store everything yourself was released, the brain could afford to slim down, keeping the intelligence, shedding the expensive storage it no longer needed. If that sounds familiar, it should. It's the same thing your smartphone does for you right now. You don't remember phone numbers anymore. You don't memorize directions. Some scientists wonder, only half joking, what that means for the brains of the future. But here's where I have to be completely honest with you, because this is where the story gets a real twist. Not every scientist agrees the shrinking even happened. For decades, brain shrinkage was treated as an established fact. Then, recently, a team of researchers went back and re-examined the very data sets those claims were built on. And they came to a startling conclusion that when you analyze the fossil evidence carefully, you can find no clear reduction in human brain size at all over any period since our species began. In their view, the famous shrinking brain might be a mirage, an artifact of messy data, of comparing skulls from different times and places that were never a fair comparison. So which is it? Did we lose a tennis ball of brain, or didn't we? The honest answer right now is that anthropologists are still arguing about it. Some see a clear worldwide shrinking that demands an explanation. Others see a statistical illusion. This is science happening in real time, not a settled fact in a textbook, but an open, unresolved debate about our own heads. And that uncertainty is exactly what makes it worth paying attention to. But let's come back to the question that's probably been nagging you this whole time. If our brains really did shrink, does that mean we got dumber than the cave painters? Almost certainly not. And here's the key idea: size isn't the same as power. A smaller brain could be a better brain, more efficient, better wired, doing more with less, the same way a modern computer chip is a fraction of the size of one from decades ago and vastly more capable. Evolution doesn't reward big. It rewards efficient. A leaner brain that costs less energy to run while staying just as clever is an upgrade, not a downgrade. So the shrinking, if it's real, may not be a story of decline at all. It might be a story of refinement, our species trading raw size for efficiency, the same way it traded brute strength for cooperation. So the next time someone says the good old days had bigger, better people, remember this: they might be literally right about the bigger. The Ice Age human had a larger brain and a stronger body than you, but bigger was never the point. And the fact that you can sit here, holding a smaller brain than your ancestors, and still understand every word of this, that might be the most impressive thing our shrinking, sharpening, endlessly strange brain has ever done.